Oh everyone, over the last few days in Ireland, it's been nauseating to see the talk of this giveaway budget by the Irish government. It's interesting because all the media have been fully behind this to say this is a budget bonanza. It's electioneering because an election is due to come up, and they've been advised not to spend as much because they might overheat the economy. It's not interesting. Always when you're trying to spend money where people need it, they talk about overheating the economy, but they never talk about reining in the huge profits that are being made by the big corporations and the very rich in Irish society. And this budget has been quite similar to pushing that narrative forward as well, and pushing that agenda forward as well, because if you drill down into the figures, a lot of it is complete and utter lip service to the deep systemic crises we have in Irish society in relation to housing, in relation to the health service, and all the other social crises we face day to day, and forcing more and more people into poverty. And this will continue, despite what they claim in this budget, by throwing a few extra crumbs at ordinary people over the next period of time. €12 in social welfare payments, next to nothing for other people who are suffering and struggling to get by with the extortionate cost of living disaster. Pushed after COVID lockdowns, the magic money tree, of course, being printed, the so-called quantitative easing policies. That is a huge ruse to transfer profits and to make the wealthier wealthier. Well, devalue the money of ordinary people. And also the impacts of the war in Ukraine in terms of the sanctions on Russia, which has pushed huge energy crises across the European continent, not to mention the huge profiteering that takes place within those energy companies. But the government's response has been to give energy credits to people. Now, isn't this interesting when they talk about energy credits? What this does is a transfer of public money into private hands, keeps the profits rolling in for the big energy companies, and at the same time, ordinary people think, well, we're getting something back, but they're not, because generally it's been put into your one hand, is being taken out on a multitude of times from the other hand, and that's how the government works with all of our public money, transferring it into private hands. And of course, even the opposition, Sinn Féin, were talking about this energy credit, which is currently about €250 going to be paid in 2 instalments of €125 before Christmas and after Christmas. And in terms of what Sinn Féin said, they just said we should give €450 of energy credits. Now, rather than targeted measures, rather than actually going after the profits of these companies, rather than actually, maybe, perhaps, this is a strange thought, nationalise our basic energy and put it for somebody's need and not to be profit off, because I've spoken in the previous video about the privatisation of our energy market, and that it's a complete and utter con job that was set up as a Thatcherite policy in terms of pushing the privatisation agenda. Before privatisation, we had the cheapest prices in Europe. Lo and behold, here in Ireland, we have the highest prices in Europe. So privatisation really is a win-win for the big companies, the big providers and the oligarchs who are profiting from this. And again, the transferring public money into private hands through this energy credit. And of course, the wealthy people in Ireland still get the energy credit. It's interesting because more people die of fuel poverty here in Ireland than energy poverty. Particularly elderly people coming into the winter are struggling to keep their rooms and houses warm. A lot of people stay in bed all day because they can't afford to keep the heating or put the heating on. Spend their afternoons going into libraries and shopping centres to stay warm. Even in England, a number of years ago, warm banks were brought in. This is how far and how depraved society is when you're seeing so much profit being made out of basic human need. But again, these are part of these once-off measures, just sticking plasters again, rather than deal with the underlying systemic crises of what's going on through the neoliberal policies. And it's also interesting because they've always said we're going to keep throwing money at basic services. The housing budget, for instance, there's nothing extra towards housing. But of course, we all know the profits are for the Help to Buy scheme to keep property prices high and to fuel more and more people into misery and housing poverty, not to mention immigration because they can't afford anywhere to live. But again, this is going to continue to 2029, which is a big transfer into private hands again. But it's also fascinating because even within this budget, there's nothing for renters. A minuscule increase to a renter's tax credit rather than actually dealing with the underlying crises of actually capping the rents. Now that's a thought, isn't it? But of course you can't do that because that goes against the European Union agenda. Maybe perhaps when people need something, we can't go cap in hand to Europe to look for their permission when our budgets have to go through their control with the fiscal rules. And with the health service as well, throwing money at the health service yet again. Keep throwing money at the health service. It's not a matter of money, but what a matter is, it's a matter of the privatisation of our health service, the outsourcing, and the overly bureaucratic nature of it, with so many people in management positions. And it's really inertia in terms of the form filling exercises that take place in the HSE, which a lot of people complain about. I know a lot of people who are working the HSE, and it's one of the biggest issues they have in terms of the box ticking exercises they have to spend, rather than dealing with the underlying issues of a person's basic health and well-being and dignity. It's not interesting, but of course, all about making money. And it's also interesting because the education budget is about 12 billion this year. Now, under that, what comes in the education budget is salaries for private schools teachers. Now, they charge extortionate fees, and who pays the salaries? It comes out of the public purse. But of course, the media won't talk about that. It's a dirty little secret here in Ireland. Don't speak about the underlying crises, for instance, in the education sector. People can't get access to special needs assistants, special education teachers. Even capitation grants, for instance, are 10 million euro this year. And coincidentally, Norma Foley has decided to spend 9 million euro on pouches for mobile phones. You couldn't make it up. This is the same government that brought you the doll bike scandal. It just keeps rolling on. It's absolute lunacy, nuts. Anybody that even has any intention of supporting this government really is either in hock with them, making huge money from their policies, or are just completely the heads in the cloud and then completely detached from reality. 9 million euro being spent on pouches for mobile phones. Did you ever hear of a locker? Did you ever hear of keeping the phones at home? Did you ever hear of putting them in a bag or putting them in a box, putting them under your desk? No, we'll use magnetic pouches for 9 million euro, but then they can't put heating and lighting on in schools. They can't fix holes in roofs, or they can't fix drainage. But of course, yeah, plenty of money can be spent on these magnetic pouches. I wonder what politician has links to these companies. We saw that through the scandal of the COVID lockdowns, with the PPE scandal, and all the other companies of friends that were making money out of it. It's similar to what was happening with the bike shed scandal with Pascal Donoghue also as well. And let's see where other issues went as well. One of the most fascinating parts of this budget as well has been part of the immigration budget. Now, it's interesting because over the last few years they've spoken about the fact that a lot of this is temporary measures because of the payments, because of the war in Ukraine, and the temporary protection directive that continues now to 2026. Not very temporary, is it? But it's fascinating because what they're trying to do is put this into non-core spending, and they're trying to massage the figures, use a bit of creative accounting, and not claim that this money is going into the immigration budget, but actually it is. Up to this year, they're bringing in this thing called Contingency Reserve Fund. Now, isn't this interesting? Sounds nice, but it's all about the uncertain international environment, and it's all temporary measures that are moved into this fund now, and trying to massage the figures on the Department of Integration, which is getting a budget officially of 8.3 billion this year. Looks like it's going to be, with this extra 2 billion that's been allocated, even though they said they don't know what the money is yet, but it has already been allocated nearly 2 billion, which adds it up to well over 10 billion euro. And if you consider the total spending on services in terms of Department of Social Protection, housing, transport, health, so forth, and others as well, that's essentially 10% of our basic total budget. You couldn't make it up. So it's going to keep profiting the commercial property owners, keep profiting the big bosses with the cheap labour, and keep making huge money, which is out of the public purse and transferred into private hands. And what they've done with this budget is complete smoke and mirrors. It's really just absolute lunacy, but this is how they operate. They've always operated on the underhand basis. They've done the same with the fuel tax, for instance, putting up the so-called carbon tax over the next period of time as well, which is going to force more people over the edge, and more people as well over the edge in terms of small businesses also, which again, who do they represent? Big businesses, despite what they're trying to do. So they're trying to claim that they care about people over the next period of time, and the nonsense that's going to come out is that they're doing the best they can with windfall taxes, which again shows you it's just a complete and utter cover-up to transfer more of our public money into private hands. And that's what you have to be aware of. So thanks again for all the support with my videos. I really appreciate them. Thanks for the likes, shares, comments, and please press subscribe to my YouTube channel. So take care. So long.